Hi there, friends. My name is Eli. I'm one of the organizers of the TechSoup Connect Canada chapter, along with my co-organizer, Ben Abel, who runs a lot of our digital marketing. Let me pass it over to our two experts who are going to present a little bit of a case study of a project they did together that brought together telemarketing and planned giving gifts and wills. Not necessarily what you naturally think as like a flavor combination that works, but they did some really interesting stuff that worked out quite well. You're going to learn how they did it, and then you're going to steal all their great ideas and bring it into your own work. And with that, let me pass it over to Siobhan and Morgan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Siobhan, just in case you're wondering about the pronunciation there, and presenting today with Morgan from Stratcom. My day job is at the David Suzuki Foundation, and I also do plan giving consulting and major gifts consulting on the side. You can find me on LinkedIn, so please do connect with me over the course of the event or right after. I'd love to connect with you there. Okay, I think we all know why we're here. It's going to be a very tight lunchish hour for us with me and Morgan dazzling you with this amazing plan giving pilot that I just did in January with more. I always say I did it. I actually did nothing, which you will hear as we discuss this. It was done by Stratcom. I just instigated it on behalf of the David Suzuki Foundation and did some follow up. You saw the high level description here. I'm going to dive right in. It's the David Suzuki Foundation is a national charity, but we use this very simple telemarketing campaign to identify almost $1.5 million in future revenue, aka plan giving, aka gifts that people decided they'll leave to us in their wills. So that has a lot of different names. You'll hear plan giving, bequests, you'll hear legacy giving is the euphemistic code for plan giving. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll be talking about bequests, which are gifts and wills, and more broadly, plan giving initiatives. Now, I hope we have all heard about why are we doing this work in the first place? There is 1 trillion with a T, I'll make the sign of T with my hands, of wealth transfer coming from the baby boomers who own everything. And they will, unfortunately, this transfer of wealth implies is they're going to die. They're dying now. So as this generation dies out, there is an enormous transfer of wealth from the boomers to the others, the sad Gen Xers, that's me, the millennials, and now Gen Z and beyond. So again, it's expected, currently happening, $1 trillion wealth transfer. A smart charity, I like to think I represent smart charities, are really interested now in ensuring they are open for business, shall we say, on accepting gifts in wills. Like, even if you're not, just go right now, hang up, run to your website, write on somewhere, anywhere on that website. We are happy to accept gifts and wills, and then run right back into this presentation. Like, you don't have to overthink this. And as I go through this, kind of basically what we said, who we talked to, and what the results were, as Morgan and I will tell you some little stories along the way. And
Yes.
you will see, I hope your takeaway is this is super easy. You should do something like it yourself. It's kind of my first takeaway.
Yeah.
Do you want to add to, we want to jump in there, Morgan?
I think one of the other things to take away from today, hopefully, is how you can identify people within your current audience that you may never thought of as potential planned gift donors, and how you can show them who have probably never even remotely considered the idea that they are actually the perfect audience. And that's really where I'm coming from. I worked at GoodWorks for about a year and a half, 2 years. And for those of you who have not heard of the book Iceberg Philanthropy, it was a movement in the industry. It was a really revolutionary approach to planned giving. And before that, lots of folks had thought that planned gifts were for really wealthy people. But the reality is, really wealthy people have done a ton of philanthropy during their lifetime, and they see their passing as a means to pass that wealth on to their children and to get lots of other tax benefits. But for regular folks who are struggling to pay their mortgage, pay their bills, send their kids to college, planned giving is a way for them to finally have an impact that they haven't in the past. And that's one of the reasons that I get really excited. I got into fundraising because I look around at the world and it is certainly not the way that I would like it to be. And this is an opportunity for us as fundraisers, who I think many of us see the world in that way, to really take that wealth that the top elite have really accumulated over decades and decades, and to spread it around to causes that are going to benefit future generations. So when I had the opportunity to talk with Siobhan about working on a campaign for David Suzuki Foundation, I was super excited, and I'm really glad to be able to share that with everybody today.
Thanks, Morgan. Feel free to use an emoji to answer yes if you've ever done any fundraising. Flash an emoji if you've ever done any telemarketing. Oh, there's hearts going up. Flash an emoji if you've ever done anything around plan giving. Okay, that's definitely. Sometimes I have been fundraising for over 25 years, but I don't like it every day. Fundraising is hard. And I see Lizzie smiling there. I know we have amazing organizations like Wish Society that you work for, Lizzie, but it is like a grind fundraising for these orgs. But if like ones like the David Suzuki Foundation, like Wish, like others that we represent, if they've been around for even 10 years, there's a good chance there's a little itty bitty gold mine there of plan giving donors waiting, and you've got the list already. Let's jump in. We know why we're doing this. There's a lot of money out there. We want to make sure we've got our open for business sign out that we are excited to accept plan gifts. So what do we do with this information? One thing I've done on the side, steal this idea immediately, donor surveys. Find a gentle way to ask people about, start gentle, ask them about their demographics. Why do they support your charity? What do they like most? What other charities do they support? To what level do they support them? Have they ever thought of gifts and wills? Have they ever thought of a gift and will to your charity, or have they already made one? Do you see that drift? Anyways, it's way nicer on the surveys I send than I made it sound there. It has a little bit of a nicer, smoother progression. But essentially, I wanted to do that, but more personal and with a huge number of people. So I'm not scared of phoning people, although most people these days are afraid of the telephone. It's just, I think it may be generational. But some days I am also afraid of the telephone. But who's not afraid of telephones is the gorgeous gang over at Stratcom. It's my first little plug, I'd say, would be like, yeah, you can try things like telemarketing with volunteers, but it's like fundraising that's led by volunteers. It has hard limits, and you're not using professionals. And sometimes you can't always guarantee professional results.
Especially on a campaign like this one, where you're talking to your supporters about something as delicate as their passing. And while some of us may be very comfortable having that conversation, many of us are not. And when you are calling a supporter of yours to ask them if they would be comfortable including you in their will, that is the kind of conversation that you want a really competent fundraiser to have. You want them to have a great script that they can fall back on when the conversation gets a little bit complicated. You want them to be able to do that active listening that we train for, and you want them to be able to share their empathy and their compassion with your supporters so that your supporters feel heard and seen, and they really want to connect with the person on the other end of the line. It is a cliche to say that people give to people, but it's a cliche for a really good reason. And that is the reality. And so many people on Siobhan's campaign, I've heard lots of those calls, and there were real connections built on those calls. And it's really important. And that's a big part of why we uncovered lots of people who'd already planned to give to Siobhan. And that's really nothing to do with us. Great, we contacted them, but they had already put David Suzuki Foundation in their will. Where I think we can be proud is all the people who showed that interest because of that phone call. And they've got legacy giving, planned giving in mind for future now. And that's because of the kinds of conversations that you can have with a really great team.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what one sneaky thing was? I talked to Morgan's team beforehand. And if you're like, oh, telemarketers, they can never really represent us. You don't want them like talking about you don't want your telemarketers talking about all the projects you do and all the stuff. You want people who are trained listeners, who have a script, a conversation script, but know how to also let it go off script and follow the donor's lead. And I would say I'd say it's always worth, if the organization has time, to have a quick meeting with the telemarketers. And you're not pitching them. They're like professional talkers, and you really just want to answer any questions they have, maybe about who they'll be talking to, what kind of people support your charity already. And don't worry about them not being experts. They're always very upfront about that on the phone. And they'll pass along those questions. And I'll talk about the statistics around them passing along those questions in a minute. Like I said, I was like, how can I take these conversations to scale? So I thought of telemarketing. I called Morgan. We put together a script, and we put together a list to call. and we had great results. I'll skip it just quickly to the results. Did you know? I mean, it helps to have a little background information like, what is she talking about? Gifts and wills. This is nuts. A lot of people, I'm not going to ask you to answer this. A lot of people don't even have a will. And first interesting statistic there. Yes, I have a slide deck. It's made of paper. 55% of Canadian adults, that's let's say over age 35, have a will. Once you're in your 70s, that figure jumps to about 90%. So everyone's got a will. Let's say by the time you're older, you got a will. But only 5% of us have a charity in our will. This is the opportunity for your charity. We want to, as a group, all of us want to move that. We want to make sure people know, put a charity in your will. You don't have to choose loved ones first, charity or charity second. And research shows that one of the biggest pushbacks on leaving gifts and wills, people know about it already. You don't have to educate them on that. You don't have to punch that clock of marketing. The idea to market instead is take care of your loved ones first. Don't forget your favorite charity. Don't let people walk off thinking they have to choose, because they will choose their loved one. Oh, I want to give all my money to my kids. Yes, and don't forget your favorite charity. Like, you've got more money than you think, probably, especially if you're a boomer these days, sitting on a property that you bought for $10,000 back in the 70s and is now worth $2 million. People have a lot of money. They don't even, when I talk to people, they don't even seem to know how much money they have.
They
And
have
if
a lot of
anyone,
assets. They have a lot of assets. And I think
assets,
that's what's really
exactly.
important is people think of the money they have and not the assets they have. Because those assets are not liquid right now. When they pass, they become liquid. That's really important for your supporters to know.
Yeah, that's right. Like, they're not making gifts out of their RSPs. They've turned them into RIFs and they're living off that now. And their houses, they're living in that house. A great point, Morgan. But you know what? The average gift, I'm talking about a lot of money here. Does anyone know what the average gift to a charity in a will is? You are very welcome to guess. I do not have prizes. But if you want to take a crack at it, throw it in the chat and I'll flash you the answer in a second. Hey, 2,500 is not a bad, it's less than $1 million. It's more than $1. Anyone else want to guess at how much average charitable bequest in Canada is these days? It's juicy. Okay, no, people are not feeling brave about this one. And I can't blame you, because it's just not a number you'd know. But would you believe $30,000? That's the average number. Some see more, some see less. That's exactly the number we see at the David Suzuki Foundation. So, as promised, Morgan, first we did the script, and I said, I don't know how to write a script for this. So Morgan very kindly sent me a paragraph. It was, I'll go quickly, and then Morgan, I'll cue you up to say a little bit more about it, because this is not my expertise at all. So he sent me a little paragraph or so, and I didn't even change it. But it was super conversational, no ask. We're not asking for money. We're certainly not saying, please put us in your will. And right away you're wondering, is it only supporters? I'll talk about the audience in a sec, the list. But first, the script. So you're thanking them for whatever kind of support it is and asking them about their motivation, like, why are you aligned with this organization's work? Why do you support them? And this does not always guarantee a long chat. I know for a fact, because I saw the numbers. Many people are like, nice talking to you, bye now, and they click down on you. But the ones who want to chat, this Stratcom's telemarketing team wound them through a gentle conversation that led towards talking about future support. And then a gentle question about, hey, is this organization already in your will by any chance? And that's the call. And a thank you, and offer to send more information, etc. So the script, again, conversational, and no ask. What would you add to that, Morgan? I was a little overwhelmed by the script, and then you made that very easy.
The really critical thing about the way that we want to approach this script is, like you said, it really isn't about an ask. It's really a gentle conversation about the fact that this is an option for this audience. Like I mentioned before, for most people who are working and struggling to pay their bills, they have no idea that they have this opportunity. So we just want to gently introduce that. And now it's also important to know that this is not really the place to do a great deal of persuasion. This is a moment where you can open up this opportunity to these supporters. You let them know that this is an option, and you offer to send them something in the mail or have them at a later point. At Stratcom, what we do is a 2 phone call process. So Siobhan has done one of those phone calls. And then there's a follow-up call that we can do in about a year and a half after that first call, where we would contact anybody who had said yes in any way, whether that's that they already have that organization in their will or that they're interested. And then we can talk to them about whether they've already done that, whether they have any questions about the process. So the first call is really about the why and not about the how. And the second call is a little bit more about the how.
See, I'm learning as we go here. Okay, so that's a bit on the script, and then the list segmentation is next, and then the follow-up. So a list, you're panicking already. You're like, okay, Siobhan, I've got 2 donors. I can't do this. But I once had a client who only had a list of 300 people to contact, and we ended up confirming 2 bequests. While I wouldn't use a telemarketing firm to connect with 300 people, I certainly would for a bigger list. So it's nice to have a big list. It's nice to have clean data. The phone numbers, you need phone numbers to do telemarketing, and they need to work. If it's an ancient list, just be aware that your telemarketers may end up like having a lot of like phone numbers out of service. It isn't going to really get you the best bang for your buck. You can test something. A good list is good enough, like even if it's a bit smaller. Who did we pick? I wrote a few ideas in the chat. Board, donors, volunteers, alumni. It's the closest relationships, which for me in this case was donors. So we went with frequency, the people who give all the time, like monthly donors. Even better, those who give over a long time horizon, like 5 years or 10 years. Put that into the perfect combo, and monthly donors who've given over 5 or 10 years. So we have the frequency and the longevity.
Yeah.
And older donors is great, but none of us, let's face it, who's got the time to be capturing that information in their CRMs, their customer relationship management software? Nobody does. But say you do. The sweet spot is people make their first will, usually when they have kids, when they leave the nest or make a nest of their own, when they have assets, maybe when they buy their first condo. So you can be looking at 40s to 75 as an age group. If you have your list is so big and you have ages, you can segment like that. Like I say, strong relationships work well for this too, even if they're not donors. And you'll see my ideas in the chat. And at the end of the day, we had 6,000 names and numbers and spent about 200 hours calling them.
Yeah, one thing I would just add that's really important that a lot of folks feel is pretty counterintuitive when you're selecting a list. It is great to have monthly donors who've been on file for 5 or 10 years. Absolutely. It's great also to have a one-time donor who's been on your file for maybe 10 years and they've been giving every single year. They've been giving the same amount every year. But the reality is, you could also have that donor who gives in 2016, they give again in 2017, they don't give in 2018, they give in 2019. They're on and off. And those donors are actually really fantastic prospects for planned giving for that exact same reason is that they really want to give to your organization. But you know what? Sometimes their bills get in the way of their ability to give to you. And those are the folks that my organization calls all the time. And we say, monthly giving is the best way for the, oh, I know it is, but I need to look at my finances at the end of the year. And the reality is that those are the folks who want to give to you so badly, and giving them the opportunity to have a massive impact.
Yeah.
So imagine that you're someone who's like desperately struggled to give $100 to this organization you care so deeply about, and then you realize that you can give $30,000 to that organization. That's just something that most of us think, I'm never going to be able to do that. Like, I think that myself. And I would love to be able to do that when I pass. And I would love to include several organizations in my will when that's a possibility for me. So these are the kinds of people that you really want to keep in mind. So the regularity is important, but the length and the continuous nature of that giving is what really matters. So whether they've taken a few years off here and there, that's really not a detractor from them being included in this list. It might be a detractor if you're making a list for monthly conversion, but when you're talking about planned giving, those are folks who are deeply committed and don't always have the money, but really care about your cause.
Oh, so many good points there. I don't even know where to start. But one thing I'll absolutely highlight is that These aren't rich donors. They're probably not rich donors. They might not be consistent because their lives have changed. I come across a lot of donors who gave to us when we opened our doors 30 years ago, but not consistently since. And one or two gifts, and then we lose touch with them. And then suddenly they flag that there is a gift in the will instead, which is interesting. Don't get too hung up on a perfect list or perfect criteria. You need perfect phone numbers. That's it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, there's other reasons to do this kind of calling. It could be about plan giving. It could be about other things for your charity. As I said, Morgan's team at Stratcom spent 200 hours calling. They reached like warm reach, about 5 people per hour doing that. And for a total of 1,000 completed calls. As I said, this happened in the new year, right after what is typically everyone's very busy giving season. Morgan had a hunch, and I think it paid off, that people were happy to have a conversation about anything except getting asked to give money again. And it worked out really well, I will say. Like I said, 1,000 completed calls. So this takes me to the follow-up. When you have 1,000 warm conversations with people, the dummy that I was, I'm like, oh, they won't have anything else to say. Yes, they sure as hell did. Over 60%. I had 620 comments, and I almost had a wee heart attack, a tiny poop, when I saw that there were 620 comments. Now, 99.9 of them were like, keep up the good work. And I did not follow up with those. But I would say I have worked at many other organizations that did telemarketing pushes for plan giving, got a lot of feedback, got people a little jazzed up, to be quite frank, and then never did a single thing with them. The telemarketers came and went, and then 5 years later, they try it again, and they wonder why they don't have any kind of solid plan giving revenue. So the follow-up is key. Okay, of course, the thing that blew my mind is we had almost 50 people out of this say, yes, you are in my will. Do the math on that. That's where I came up at $30,000 each. That's where we come up times 48 people. I now know that we have 1.5, almost 1.5 million, 1.4 in future revenue. We call it deferred revenue if we want to be fancy, and we are a bit fancy. So with that, I was like, hands down, this is like the best thing ever. I called them all up and emailed them some information to thank them. A couple hundred more, at least 100 more, I can't remember that stat off the top of my head, wanted information on plan giving. So I sent that to them. I did the data entry. And for those last two things, I said very quietly under my breath there, data entry and follow up on the info. Don't overthink this. For the follow up on information, just an email. Thanks for even considering this kind of gift. Here's some statistics you might not be aware of. Did you know that 5% of Canadians have put a gift to a charity in their will? Thank you for even thinking about joining that group. And here's a little information on us. Here's an annual report. P.S. If you ever do put us in your will, let me know so I can thank you personally. That's the kind of conversation, and followed up with an email so I can send them links to things. It's nice to send them something where your legal name and if you have a charity number are like handy front and center. That's a great thing to have. And data entry, I use Razor's Edge. It's the sledgehammer of heinous donor software, but it works. Just make sure, just throw a little, whatever your CRM calls it, throw a tag, add an action, add a note, add a constituent code, just do a blanket ad to everyone you talk to saying, hey, they had a conversation about plan giving, and put a date on it. That's all you really need to do. I always say, don't do it, do the follow-up, but don't overthink it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we'll always talk with organizations about before we get into a campaign like this. Like, we love doing these campaigns. We think they're hugely successful and incredibly important in this moment. But it is so crucial that you have the right team to actually take the next step. We really don't want to generate all of these leads for you if you don't have someone who's going to follow through, because as Siobhan said, it's not worth your money to spend all of this time on the phone, having these great conversations, generating this interest, and then there's no one there to actually connect with that person and to steward them all the way to putting a gift in their will. And if they've already got a gift in their will, this is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize about planned giving is once that supporter has you in their will, your work has just begun. Getting into their will is not the end of the journey. That stewardship process, once you're in their will, makes so much of a difference in terms of whether you stay in their will. Most people will change their will 3 to 4 times in their life, and you can stay in the will. Your role in their will can increase, or you can be taken out. And the other factor that you really want to consider is that legacy donors tend to increase their annual giving value after they've put you in their will. So all of that stewardship, having a stake in what that organization stands for and what they're accomplishing means a lot to folks. And that's why it's so important to take that next step and have someone like Siobhan who really understands what David Suzuki Foundation is all about and what that person having them in their will is going to mean to them. She can take that relationship and really make it a huge deal. Whereas what we do is just identify those folks and then send them back to you.
Yeah, it's like the 1-2 punch there. Excellent message there from Birgit about, do you have to be a registered charity for this action or like a nonprofit organization? Either works just great. I was a little bit cheeky in my reply there saying dead people don't care as much about an actual charitable tax receipt. And of course you can use charity tax receipts for a person who's passed away for their estate, still pays taxes in that final year. But we don't care about all that. People might leave a charitable gift for the engineering association because they were an engineer, and that might not have charitable status, but it's like whatever's close to their heart. So that's an excellent question. You don't have to be a registered charity for this kind of giving. Because of course, in a will, people can leave money to anyone. I saw someone leave money to their greyhound. You really can. That was a complex will, by the way. Okay, so as I said before, the most important part to me was this 48 new bequest donors confirmed, the 1.4 million in future revenue. And over time, as Morgan started to say, then that relationship comes to me and people are like, wow, what do I do if someone wants to put us in the will? And the answer is not much. This is a humble donor group. They are not expecting to suddenly get calls from the CEO, etc. I just treat them like I treat any of my other nicer donors. I like to make sure they're getting newsletters and whatnot. And I send them touch points, maybe 3 or 4 times through the year. I encourage them to sign up for other communications if they want. But I don't go nuts. I don't go out of my way to do special, unusual stewardship for this group. Again, as they presented themselves to me, they're not typically flashy people. The expectation isn't there. Sure, their gift is gonna be worth, we know, an average of $30,000, but they're not the same as someone who comes up and gives me $30,000 cash. They're expecting the calls from the CEO. They're expecting me to hop to it when they call. A very different relationship. So I would say, don't panic. Don't let that hold you back from starting these kinds of relationships with your donors. And big picture, you're like, okay, plan giving's great. I don't think my boss is going to go for this. Come on, Siobhan. Like you and Morgan, that's great for you too. But I would say, yeah, 50 people said we were in the will, but I always take the credit. I talked to 1,000 people warmly about the David Suzuki Foundation. Do you think I have that kind of time? Absolutely not. So these wonderful telemarketers did it for me. And how do you think those 1,000 people, how do you think their feeling of the relationship with us has changed? Someone called them, thanked them, asked about why they support us, and allowed them to talk about themselves and their giving for a little while. And when we send them the next ask, how much more warmly will they respond to that ask than if we had never reached them by phone? That is no answer needed there. They'll react more positively. Don't you think, Morgan?
I was saying, donors who have you in their will are significantly more likely to increase their annual giving. Their feelings towards you their loyalty increases with every conversation about that because they've decided that you are important enough to be part of their legacy. And that's a huge step for people to take. They have narrowed down. I'm sure most people have dozens of organizations that they give to over their lifetime, I hope. And the reality is that most people will only choose 3 or 4 to put in their will. And that's probably not all the organizations that they ever chose to give to in their lifetime. Some organizations we give to because we got a nice piece of mail and it hit us in the right way. Some we were stopped on the street by someone who was funny and they got a laugh out of us. And we decided to give them $15 a month. And we did that for a few years until our credit card ran out and we never renewed it. But for the organizations that are at our core, where when we're in a really deep conversation, we bring them up, those are the ones that we put in our will. And those are the ones that you want to build that relationship with. And whether they give more or not, those are people who are going to talk about you, tell their friends to give to you. When they've got a birthday or something and they don't want any more junk, they might say, hey, make a donation to this organization that I've put in my will. And all of those things are the intangibles that don't come from in the results to these campaigns, but having these conversations can really augment that loyalty that they have for your organization.
Definitely, you nailed it with this isn't an either or. They're not going to say that you're in the will and then stop giving. I find the exact opposite. I talk to hundreds and hundreds of donors who have gifts and wills. Most of them continue giving. I only very few, and they pop out in my mind, say, hey, I've put you in my will, and now we are on such fixed income. Things are a little tight around here. We do have to stop giving regularly while we're alive, but you don't worry, we're remembering you in our estate plans. That's like a smattering of people, but mostly it's both. And some
Yeah.
even give quite big gifts still. Like I've got a donor, she gives $50 a month, which is a lovely monthly gift, has told us many times and confirmed that they were in her will, and occasionally will give stock gifts. So you can see she's doing different things with her assets. So she recently gave us $9,000 a gift of stock. It's one of the biggest gifts. It's by far the biggest gift we've ever had from her. But I can see that now that she's in her late 70s, she is winding down her estate. She's able to spend out assets like stock. So all that to say, not either or, get that plan giving going. They'll end up being like two kinds of donors to you. And again, forget about plan giving altogether. Why not? If you really need help connecting with people warmly at scale, it could be for anything like a big special event involvement of some kind, some very targeted volunteering that you need, again, at scale. Major gifts conversations, like in a lead up to a capital campaign. Now, of course, there's all the usual reasons to use telemarketing for gifts, and especially converting single one-time gift donors into monthly donors. If you're not using telemarketing for that, you're losing money. Like you're missing out on money. That's like the number one thing people love to use telemarketing for these days. But when you're thinking of it as more of a conversational, no ask conversation, again,
Yeah.
it could be about volunteering, event involvement, lead ups to capital campaigns. Maybe you're just talking up a big new project that's coming, a big new initiative, a new building you have to build. There's no limit if you have some money, and you don't even need time because you're paying for the time of the telemarketers. Do you see other types of campaigns, Morgan, that aren't always just straight asks for cash?
Yeah, we've got a few campaigns that we run that are not straight asks for cash. Most of our campaigns aren't really asks for cash. They really are about converting folks over to monthly giving. That's our key focus. In large part, I'm obsessed with monthly giving because they make the best legacy donors, and planned giving really is where I put a lot of my emphasis as a fundraiser. But we do a lot of welcome calling, which we find is incredible for retention. Obviously, retention is a huge problem in our market at the moment. I think it's less of a problem here in Canada than it is in the States. I know I was at Icon a few weeks ago in Seattle, and there were a ton of conversations about how poor their first year retention was. And they were looking at an average of about 20%. I think in Canada, just based on the conversations I've had since then, I think our retention is probably closer to 35%, which is like top tier in the US. And in order to get that, they are sending out handwritten thank you notes within 24 hours, making a phone call within a week, and making sure that they get an impact report and another ask. So all of that's happening in year one. And I think we have a little bit less of an onus on us to do all of the bells and whistles, but we know for sure that when we make a welcome call to a new monthly donor, they're much more likely to stay on board. When we make a welcome call to a first time, one time donor, they're significantly more likely to make that second gift and to become a regular donor, not just the one who was entertained or moved by the piece of mail or email or whatever ask it was. So those are the kinds of things that we definitely do. We have done, I think, a little bit of like event type calling, but because of the ROI factor, that one's a little bit tougher. So, with welcome calling, there is a clear ROI that we can report back to a board, and we know how boards like to see a positive ROI. So that can come with welcome calling. The only other non-ask calling that I know we've done in the past is donor preference calling, where if somebody has decided that they don't want to hear from you by one channel or another, after a certain amount of time, you're actually allowed to call that person for administrative purposes. And if you call them and say, hey, we've got this flag saying that you're not interested in receiving X, Y, or Z type of communication, would you be interested in coming back on board to get email, to get phone calls, to get SMS, to get direct mail. We get surprisingly high response rates of people saying yes to that. And the future income that you can generate because you've got those folks back into your telephone files is massive. So those are not direct revenue generators, but great conversations that we can have on your behalf.
I never even thought of that. But yeah, retention is a huge disaster for most charities. People are like, we're doing great if they can even keep even like maybe just under half of first-time donors giving again. That would be like the top.
Oh,
That would be
yeah.
the best performers. Maybe close to half. It's a
Yeah.
disaster. Yeah, it's a total disaster.
Yeah. 50 to 60% is our usual active rate in Canada, I think, about 60%. So for your active donors, are they coming back next year? It's probably usually around 60% at best, which is not anywhere close to as good as we should be able to have it.
Yep. Yep. It is tricky out there. Morgan, did you have any like final words before we turn it over for a last chance for questions? And
No, I think we've covered everything that I really wanted to get out. I think the most important thing for me is just go out there and look at your program and see what you can do. Not every organization here should be talking to someone like me. Lots of you can probably do this internally. And if you have the time and you have the resources that you can make these calls, it's such a great way to get in touch with your supporters, give them a great feeling, and also generate incredible amounts of long-term revenue and to start to build a program. The other one thing I did want to say, if you're trying to cultivate new planned giving support, what we're doing really isn't going to do much of that. What you really want to do, I am a huge believer in Good Works process of sending out autobiographical, very nice looking letters. They send out these fantastic letters. They send 5 over the course of 2 years, along with a phone call at the end of year 1 and a phone call at the end of year 2. And basically, these letters, the purpose is to hold up a mirror to that supporter and say, guess what? You are actually a planned giving prospect. And we've talked about that throughout today's chat. And this is a really great way of doing that. And if you're not able to work with an agency to do that, find somebody who's already a legacy donor, ask them really personal questions, write a moving autobiographical letter, and then send that out to your really loyal donors.
oh, and those planned giving donors who've already said, yeah, you're in my will, they love to, they'll help you out. There'll be a testimonial, and you can use that testimonial in a lot of little exciting places. Yeah. So even that's just like one thing you can do.
Thank you all for showing up here today and being part of this. See you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.